Hello again, poetry lovers. This is Jim Ransom speaking to you from my usual habitat in Pennsylvania. And I know you are waiting for a poem or two as an escape from the ennui of too many days cooped up to avoid the 100-degree heat we are facing in many parts of the country. I have to say, and I'm not rubbing it in, but so far we have escaped the worst of it in western Pennsylvania, mostly due to timely rains and cool fronts sweeping in from the north. However, those cool fronts have often brought with them from Canada some rather nasty forest fire smoke, so nobody's getting off unscathed this summer. Today we'll enjoy some poetic variety, poems about summer, and poems about life after war, and we'll have an ekphrastic poem, which of course is one inspired by a painting or a photograph, and finally one about a prodigal son. If the last one reminds you of any current person or events, I can only say it was written before 2018. And I might add, good poems from the past often remind us of current times. First of all, here's a poem by Richard Aldington. Richard Aldington, of course, was a British poet and novelist who did his work primarily in the 20th century. And this first poem is called Au Vieux Jardin. I have sat here happy in the gardens, watching the still pool and the reeds and the dark clouds, which the wind of the upper air tore like the green leafy boughs of the diverse-hued trees of late summer. But though I greatly delight in these and the water lilies, that which sets me nighest to weeping is the rose and white color of the smooth flagstones and the pale yellow grasses among them. This is a simple imagist poem because Aldington was a member of that milieu of poets. And so you can expect his poems to become, or to be full of images. And that was certainly is Au Vieux Jardin. Now, here's another more recent poem that was written by a friend of mine from Kansas, whose name is Roy Beckemeyer. This is from his book called Stage Whispers. We've been in this book for poems before, and I would say that Roy Beckemeyer probably deserves more fame and recognition than he has had, but he's not a college professor at Harvard, and that would help in the field of poetry. But he's a wonderful poet, nevertheless. And I'm going to read this one. Angel Ordering the Exiles from Paradise. They would become like rabbits now. He knew he would soon find them sneaking back into the garden, lusting after sweet berries, succulent pearls, brilliant pomegranate seeds. They would couple like rabbits. Their offspring would be as devoted to poaching as the damned pair, the man, his rib wife, naked, lacking feathers, fur. They had daubed themselves with clays and stains, covered their bodies in vain attempts to mimic better things. But they could not blend in. He had them pegged, knew their deceits before they could fully form their plans. They would soon weave cloaks, he thought, and what poor imitations of an angel's rainbow wings those would be. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the painting by Karen Lob-Novak called Exiles from Paradise, upon which this poem was based. You can probably find that on the internet. Exiles from Paradise by Karen Lob-Novak. She was at one time the wife of the philosopher and writer Michael Novak. He's known as a Catholic philosopher, I think. And this is an ekphrastic poem by Roy Beckemeyer based on her painting, Exiles from Paradise. I think it's quite good. And if you would get that painting or find it on the internet, and then look up the poem by Roy Beckemeyer, I think you'll see what a great job he did of recreating the message of that poem, of that painting, I should say. Okay, now the next poem is going to be one by Carl Phillips. Carl Phillips is a is a professor at St. Louis University, and this poem is entitled "The War." Then the war. They planted flowers because the house had many rooms and because they'd imagined a life in which cut flowers punctuate each room, as if each were a sentence not just to be decorated, but to be given some discipline. What the most memorable sentences, like people, always slightly resist. Spit of land, rags of cloud rack. Meanwhile, hawk's nest, winter's nest, stamina as a form of faith, little cove that a life equals. What that meant, I think, by what they called the soul. Twilight taking hold deep in the marshweed, in the pachysandra, where the wind can't reach. Then the war. Then the field and the mounted police parading their proud-looking horses across it. Then the next morning's fog. The groundsman barely visible inside it, shadow-like, shade-like, grooming the field back to immaculateness. Then the curtains billowing out from the lightless room toward the sea. Then the one without hair stroked the one who had some. They closed their eyes, if gently, hard to say how gently. Then the war was nothing that still bewildered them, if ever it had. That's a slightly complex poem. And if you ever see a picture of Carl Phillips, he's a fairly slight, bald-headed fellow. Looks like he couldn't harm a fly, and much less take part in a war. And really, he's not. I would find that poem online. It's also the title of a book of poetry that he wrote. and read it again. It's worth a second go. Incidentally, he won a Pulitzer Prize. I'm not sure I mentioned that. Around 2015, from the book of which Then the War was the title poem. Finally, let's have another poem by Roy Beckemeyer. And this poem, and I hope I can still find it here. Ah, yes, it's hiding here someplace. And it's called The Prodigal Son. The Prodigal Son goes to the disco. All blurry-eyed, quaalude, floppy legs. That's the way I like it, she chants. Pulls him over, crumples his polyester jacket, pats his breast pocket for a packet of pills, a roll of bills, crooks a finger through his gold chain, leads him out onto the floor, the mirrored shards pimping out flashes of color, the bass ringing in his ears. He hasn't seen daylight, much less sunlight, for weeks. His half of his old man's fortune down now to small bills and coins. The blonde's interest is already drifting off toward another pimply-faced kid fresh off the caravan from the Negev. She turns to the girl child she's training up, says, "Don't feel bad for him, my pomegranate, my henned lamb. It's their sons these old bastards welcome back with open arms. It's their damn sons that they forgive." I think that poem is redolent with echoes in our own day and age. And that's it for today. But remember, poetry is timeless, and any resemblances to people you know or have even heard of is purely coincidental. Thanks for tuning in and listening to another episode of Morning Jim Poetry. Bye now.